back to another episode of Kassick's Corner, a podcast for teachers and those who want to learn about the lives of teachers because I am one. I've been one for a hot minute, and I got some stuff to say. So sit around, lean back, relax a little bit because I got a long episode for you, and I might get emotional, and that's just like a fair warning. I probably won't because emotions are hard and scary, and I'm projecting this to a countless amount of people because I don't know how to possibly account for everyone who might eventually see this because the internet is a wasteland. So I just finished class again. I think I mentioned that last time. I'm getting into like this habit now of where my class ends at like 6:30 and I've sat in front of this computer for like an hour and a half kind of like really heavy like emotional type of learning type things, and then I come on here and like I expect myself to like be ready and able to have bigger conversations about like my profession and things, and it's taxing. But it's been a long week. We had Monday off, and it's yesterday I had meetings all day, and today it's Wednesday, and it's been a long week. And I've only taught one day this week, but I didn't get any time to myself today, like at all. Like I haven't even eaten today because, well, one, I'm not really hungry, and I'm trying to be skinny, so we don't have to talk about that. We don't have to talk about that. Today, what I wanted to talk about is I alluded to it in my last episode, and I was just listening to my last episode on the way to work today because I like listen to my podcast to like edit them for timestamps and like see how it sounds and all that kind of stuff. I like review my own podcast basically to make sure that everything is doing the thing it needs to do. So when I'm watching that, I think about all the different things like I wanted to talk about or focused on or like, kind of like teased in the net for the next episodes. And the biggest thing that I noticed about my last episode, which was, what is this? This is episode 9. So episode 8, I was talking about just kind of like the things that remind me of students. And like 70% of that list was about speech and debate. And this is going to be a longer episode. I mean, I assume I haven't, super planned everything out, but this is the topic that I want to talk about today. And I'm probably going to miss a whole bunch because in like a big topic like this, and this is why I say like I'm going to allude to it and I'm going to like talk about it in a second because it's hard to like plan for what I'm going to talk about because of the fact that one, there's no one to bounce anything off of, so it's just like my thoughts bouncing around in my brain, and you don't want to really see that, to be honest. But this is what this is, so this is what you are here to listen to. So anyway, the reason like I keep alluding to it is because it's like this big topic, but I felt ready to talk about it today. And as I was looking for stuff to like prepare, I found, I was scrolling through like old emails that I've saved and, old pictures of students that like, popped up when we took pictures at tournaments and things like that. And it just kind of like put me in the zone to like, today is the day. Today's the day. Like, I want to talk about it. So today's episode is focused on speech and debate, which is an activity that I was the coach of and still do coach, just at a different school now. And like what it means, what it is, how I kind of evolved it, and then kind of like a bookend to like my story at my old school. So a lot of those things are going to come up for me. And then, that's like the emotional part where a lot of this stuff is going to bring back some stuff that I probably should deal with eventually. I've dealt with it, I'm in therapy, so all that kind of stuff has been dealt with. I promise. Like, don't worry, okay? I'm healthy. I'm mentally stable. I'm mentally healthy. Mentally stable is like a stretch. Anyway, I'm gonna stop it myself there because I'm gonna go off on a weird tangent that this is not the podcast for. Okay. Anyway, so speech and debate is a huge topic to kind of like tackle in an episode like this. But as I was thinking about what I want this podcast to be and what I want to eventually happen because of this podcast is, I want to publish and I want to like be out there and I want to be like a voice for educators. I want to be a voice for, that community in so many different ways. And it's hard for me to talk about like my teaching experience without talking about speech and debate because it has been and was such a big part of like who I am as a person, right? Like I said, listening to that last episode this morning kind of made me realize that it's like, wow, 60 to 70% of the things that I talked about that are these big impactful memories from educating in general kind of rely on this event that I have been coaching for a long time. So to start off, I do kind of want to give you guys a glimpse. If you don't know like what speech and debate or forensics is, basically, it is an activity that's it has a national association. There's a national speech and debate association, so it's across the whole country. It's not just like here in the state that I live in, right? It's literally everywhere. It's a national thing, and basically, what it is, it provides a forum for students to voice their opinions, voice their feelings, voice themselves, get better at speaking, all that sort of thing. The way that I kind of describe it is like competitive arguing and like competitive acting, for lack of better terms. That's like an oversimplification of it in a bajillion capacities. But this isn't really the forum to like get really deep into like what is each event, how do we do good at it, how do we coach it. If we're interested in that, I can do that. I have some experience in those realms, but today's kind of more of like what the impact is, my experience with it, and then like I said, kind of like the stories that kind of have developed with it, because those are the things that I care about, right? This is a podcast for like a safe space for stories and for advocating for the education community. So when I am talking about it today, it's not going to be a lot of advice. It's just going to be a lot about like my experience. So, like I said, it's basically competitive arguing, competitive speaking, competitive acting, right? And in there, there's like a debate category, which where you have like events like public forum debate, which is usually a partner activity. You have Lincoln Douglas debate. Those are like the two big ones. And in those, you're given like a topic that is a monthly topic, bi-monthly topic that students research, learn about, and then they go to tournaments where they are basically debating another team from another high school. And there's a judge in there that determines a winner. That's the bare bones. That's all you really need to know. For the speech side of things, there's a lot of events. The big ones that are like kind of in our league that I've been competing in for a long time are like original oratory, meaning a student would write their own speech, usually persuasive, that they would try to convince someone to agree with them on their side. There's also informative speaking, which is basically just a student saying, here's a really cool thing that I know a lot about, and I'm going to teach you about it. And again, it's all a speech. Those two are very much, won by being good speakers. And those are generally about like, hey, I have this thing to say and I want to say it. You have extemporaneous speaking, which is an event that's basically focused on like current events, whether it's international or national events that get students to research like what's happening in the world right now. They are given a selection of topics at the beginning of a round, and then they are given 30 minutes to prepare in answer to that topic. So then they are supposed to give a 7 minute speech, no more than 7 minute speech about said topic. So they get 30 minutes to prepare. It's like spontaneous, extemporaneous. That's kind of where it comes from, where it's saying you make this speech based on this topic. You have 30 minutes to prep to give a 7 minute speech. They are graded on, sources, evidence, analysis. Think like you are performing a 5 paragraph essay, right? The speech events are where more like the drama comes in. So we have our like speaking events, like our platforms, and then we have kind of our like speech events, which are like drama, humor, duo, program oral interpretation. All of those are taking a published piece of literature and then performing it, acting it out. It can be anything that has a script, any monologues. This is where kids can get really creative with like their acting side of things. So, a lot of theater kids kind of lean into this. And it's basically saying who performed this and who cut it the best to deliver the best message, because you can only speak for 10 minutes. So you take like this big ass play and you have to cut it down to like a 10-minute performance. So in all of these events, right, the whole point of this is to become a better speaker, to give yourself a platform to discuss things that you care about and to shed light on a lot of issues, right? Like in debate, we talk a lot about like foreign and current events where we're talking about like the happenings in the world, right? So the kids that do this are very much people who know what's going on in the world, know how to articulate a point, and they kind of are able to put themselves out there in that capacity, right? On the speech side of things, it's very much more of the fact of, it's like, I have this really cool, awesome thing that I want to advocate for, and I'm going to get that out, right? So as a speech and debate like community, we like wholeheartedly value the idea that like your voice matters, your perspective matters, and we want that to be like the core of this community, right? So even right off the bat, like as an English teacher, and as someone who like values the written word and like reading and literature and all those things, right off the bat, like those values align with like everything I believe as, that person. So when I discovered this, and I didn't discover this until my first year of teaching, which I'll get into in a second, the idea here is that the values of the speech and debate association, this community, is literally just like, we want to teach students how to use their voices in the best way they can. And I bet like any coach in the nation would probably advocate for that, because anyone who's coaching this activity is one who cares about it. Because when I go into like what it requires, you're going to realize that it's like, oh yeah, there's like a lot of stuff in here that is hard to do as like as a person, as a coach, that um, kind of necessitates the value of what we believe it is, right? So going into that a little bit, when I have been a coach ever since I've been like competing as a coach and have had a competitive team of students, it inquires like requires like a week of practice, right? So we'll practice, usually practice like 2 or 3 times a week, depending on like what students need, for a couple hours. So I would say like 5 to 6 hours of practice a week is usually like the average for most people on a team. So, I would have like lessons ready for practice. I would have activities ready for practice for like community building. We would do a lot of circle time. And then, once a week at the high school level, we would have a tournament like on a Saturday. So basically, every Saturday, we would wake up super early in the morning. They would have to put on like really nice clothes. Because the other thing about it is like presenting yourself, right? Like when you're expressing your opinions and you're expressing your voice and you're trying to build a platform for yourself, another piece of it is like, I want to present myself in the best way that I can, right? So students will dress up, we'll meet at the school at like 6:30 in the morning, sometimes at 5:45, sometimes I think one time we met like really super early, like 5, when we were driving a couple hours away. And then we would drive to a high school in that area that was hosting the tournament. We would compete all day. Usually it would be like 3 rounds of competition. Sometimes students would compete in six because they would be like double waived, meaning you could do like a speech and debate event. You could do two speech events. And then basically would spend all day Saturday at this school, and then we would drive home. Tournaments usually end around 8:30 on a good tournament. When tournaments inevitably fall behind, we get out of there after awards at like 10:30, and then we don't get home till like 11:30 or midnight, kind of depending on things. So yeah, it's 5 hours of practice a week on top of like a 14 to 16 hour weekend day on a Saturday. And then, you're up early again on Monday, like ready to go back to work. So as a teacher, it's exhausting, just like the after school commitments, and then like you're giving up on whole entire weekend day to go and like support these kids and these things. So being a coach is like not a small thing. So when I said that the community itself is full of people who value what the event stands for, is completely true, because how else could you expect somebody to spend, basically 24 extra hours in a week on a job, right? And talking into the community. Not even every school coach gets paid for this. So there's a lot of commitment on like the coach side. There's a lot of commitment on the student side, because again, they're spending their time doing this. They have to do the prep work, and they are doing this just as much as the coach is, right? So there's a lot of like commitments that way. And the only reason I say this is because it really shows you kind of like the depth of like the activity, right? We're talking about this thing that a lot of people don't even know exists. um and as I get into it, I was the first one at my old school to even start a team. Like my school had been around for some 20 something years, and nobody in the past had ever started a team until I got there. And there's still tons of high schools and there's still tons of like middle schools around the country that don't even know that this is existing and don't even offer this activity. And I think that's like a huge loss, just because of like what I said. What I believe that it brings to the table is so valuable to just people in society, that it kind of blows my mind that people don't know about it more. So I say all that just to set the stage for like my personal experiences with it, and like how I've kind of had to advocate for it over the years, and the community I built at all these different places in this activity. And it would be wild for me to have this conversation without kind of establishing that baseline of what it is, how much work it entails, and like where it comes from, right? And in saying all of that, I think it kind of leads naturally into like how I got started with it. So as I was a first year teacher in, God, like 2016, I think was my first year teaching technically. We would do a debate unit at the end of 8th grade. Towards the end of 8th grade year was like probably February, March. At the time, I was just like, following the motions of like my other 8th grade teaching partner was doing this. So I was also doing this. I had only taught one 8th grade class and then two 6th grade classes at the time. So my 8th grade class was kind of like, its own little entity of things. And to this day, I've said this before on one forum or another, or probably on this podcast, is like that first 8th grade class of mine was to this day my favorite class of students ever that I've ever had. Like just the class in its entirety was just like the perfect group of students, the perfect teacher for them at that perfect moment where it all just kind of like made sense, and maybe it's like a first year thing, maybe it's like an eighth grade thing. I haven't taught eighth grade since that first year, so it could be a bunch of different factors, but there's something about that like first year for me there's never been a better class of students. Anyway, that wasn't even the point. That was like such a tangent that I just went on. Anyway, the idea of this unit was basically something I just kind of went along with because it was something we were supposed to do. So my partner teacher was like, "Yeah, we have this like argumentative writing unit, blah blah blah, whatever." So we did all of that, and the big thing in eighth grade was giving like a persuasive speech. So they had to get up in front of the class towards the end of the year and basically give a speech on something they cared about, what a topic they would have to research it, and then present the speech to the class. And it went off pretty well. I did like an example, and we kind of went through all of those motions at the end of that unit. As to build in time for teachers to like grade things, we would watch the movie The Great Debaters with Denzel Washington, and I think Lawrence Fisher is in it. I think that's the right actor. I've seen it like a bajillion times and I don't even remember. It's a Denzel Washington for sure is in it, and there's a bunch of other people that are familiar. It came out in like 2007, 2008. And what it does is this movie follows a group of debate students who are African American, and they are kind of going against like all these high prestigious like white schools. And it's kind of about this story of, racial segregation. It's the story of racism in this time where a lot of these, primarily black colleges weren't getting like the same treatment in like this debate category and things like that. There's a lot of like really heavy scenes of, racial violence and things like that in this movie that kind of really exemplify kind of the time period in which it sets. I don't remember the time period, so I'm not going to say it right off the bat because I don't remember. But basically, it follows this team of debate students at this college, and they have a coach. Denzel Washington is the coach. And it kind of follows their story as they kind of go to like higher and higher events, and they win and they practice and they become closer as a team. And we had watched that eighth grade year, like I said, as a way for like kids to like engage with like what debate looks like. They have a really good like speech moment in there. They have this moment that I always do with kids. I'm gonna actually do it right now. So if you're watching, you can see. In the movie, Denzel Washington gives them all to a lake, and they put a rock in their mouth, and he makes them like speak to practice enunciation with the rock on their mouth. So I'm gonna show you what that looks like. I usually use a Jolly Rancher when I do this with students, and I have done this with students. I usually use like a Jolly Rancher or something that like they can then eat. But some people do it with a pen, and I think that's kind of gross because it's like then the pen is in your mouth. But whatever, you know what? That's neither here nor there. So anyway, I'm gonna show you what that looks like. So basically, what you would do is you would put the pen in your mouth, and then you would have to try to enunciate your words in the same way so that when you take it out, you are over enunciating, so that when you are debating, it becomes a lot more natural for you to enunciate all your words, right? Because when you're giving a speech and when you're debating, it's really important that you enunciate clearly, that you communicate clearly. And that scene always makes kids laugh. I think about it all the time when we do practice. When kids are like, "What can I practice?" I'm like, "Read your speech with the Jolly Rancher in your mouth and practice enunciating because it's literally going to set you so far apart." And so we were watching this movie. We get to like this big scene at the end where, this kid delivers like this beautiful speech, and, there's uproarious applause, things like that. And I don't remember, I'm not going to tell you how it ends because that would be stupid. Go watch it. It's a really good movie. That's that. And we finished it. The credits were rolling. It's really, I was sitting in the back, just like first year teacher stuff, just like hanging out, whatever. Kid comes up to me, and he looks at me and he's like, "Hey, Kassick, can we do that? Like, can we do that? Like, can we start a team?" And I was like, "Bro, I don't know. Like, what do you mean? Can we do that?" And I was like, can we make a debate team? Do we have a debate team? Can we do that?" And another kid came up. He's like, "Oh my God, yeah, that'd be so cool. That'd be so awesome. Like we should do that." And I looked at them and I was like, "Are you being serious right now? Because like, say less. Like, I'll do it if you guys are really into it." So probably that night, being the first year teacher that I had kind of alluded to that. I was probably like tutoring that night, like right after work, and I looked it up and I was like, "Oh, their debate teams are like real." And I thought they just existed when Denzel Washington was pretending, was when he was acting. So this was news for me too. Like I had no idea that it was a thing. I had heard whispers, and like in student teaching, I did some like little bit of like here and there. I heard some whispers about it, but like never really knew that it was like a big thing, right? Like I may have judged in a tournament in student teaching, but like never did I realize that it was like this big, huge event that millions of people participated in, right? And also, there's like a lot of famous people that have done this. Like Zac Efron used to do it in high school. Josh Gad, Olaf from Frozen, Oprah Winfrey. There's a Supreme Court justice. I think it's Tanaji Brown. I hope I'm saying that name right. Otherwise, it's on record that I'm a dumbass. So there's all of those people, and there's millions more, hundreds more that have like made a career out of their participation in speech and debate that have kind of like given them a start. So it's a really cool thing, and I didn't even know that, right? I knew none of this. So I went home and looked it up, and like the next day or the next week or whatever, I went out to some kids and I was like, I mean, yeah, are you guys being serious? Because like I looked it up and that they definitely exist. We can definitely do that. And it was towards the end of the year, like I said, when we kind of got to this point. So the next couple of weeks, I was like, I don't know what to do. And then my partner teacher was like, I'm going to do this. You can do whatever you want. And I was like, okay, sick. I'm going to host debates in my class and see how it goes. So we hosted debates. We did like three topics. I remember them being like super controversial. I remember we did a debate about abortion was one of them for sure. And I was like, as a first year teacher, nobody told me I shouldn't do that. It went off really well. Like I said, like my class was like so perfect at the time that it went really well, but I struck gold because any other topic is kind of assessing that is different. And when I said like, hey guys, we're going to do like partner debates, pick a partner, pick your topic, and we're going to run this like, everyone will get 2 minutes to speak. You'll have like time for crossfire, asking questions. You'll have time to like rebut, and have that argument, have that debate. And we did that, and then I got kids so excited to do that they were like, "Oh my God, Kassick, so you're making a team? You're making a team?" And I was like, "Shit, I guess. Like, yeah, if you guys are into it, like, let's do it." I had that like first year teacher energy. So that summer, I remember specifically that summer, I had reached out to a bunch of people in the community. And anyone who knows me knows that like I hate talking to people. I hate phone calls. I kind of despise all of those things. But there's something in me that like shifts when it's advocating for students and it's doing something that creates something good for them. It's like parent teacher conferences, making calls are hard. Having phone calls home like that is still challenging for me. But when it's something that like is an advocacy, when it's something that is a point of like, I'm going to do this really cool thing for these kids, like I will do that in a heartbeat. So that summer I had called like a bunch of people to like set up meetings with them about like how to start a team, like what do I need to know. I met with a bunch of people. They would give me like all these files, and they were like, here's what it looks like, here's ballots, here's how to start a team, here's like the organization you're going to need to contact, here's like blah blah blah, here's like all these different things. And I was like, cool, awesome. So I spent probably about a few weeks in that whole like realm of things. And in that realm of like conversation and work, I compiled like a folder to give to my principal at the time that said like, hey, I want to start this club that's like speech and debate, and I don't know if we're going to be ready to compete, but I have a bunch of kids that like want to start a club and we're going to do it. So it was like a 30-page binder at this point. I made two copies so that like in the meeting I could like flip through the pages with him, and then I could leave one with him so that he could like look through and decide about how to start a club, right? And for him it was just a club at the time, but for me this was like this much bigger issue. I handed it to him. I remember meeting with him towards the beginning of probably July that summer, maybe mid-July, beginning of August, before school started. And I was like, hey, I did a bunch of research. Here's the team. Here's what it started. Here's what it's going to look like. Here's how I can get going with it. Here's like the 5-year goals for me, like what I want as a coach, what I hope for as our team. I compiled, like I said, like 30 pages, two binders, collated all of these documents, all of these resources. I had appendices. I had a table of contents. Like I did all this fucking shit. And I go to this meeting and I slide the binder to him and I'm like, hey, like we planned this meeting, blah, 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 blah. He looks at the table of contents. He closes the book and he says, yeah, you're good. Bro, like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean that's it? Like, what do you mean? For those of you who aren't looking at the screen, I'm looking exasperated. Anyway, I was so pissed that he just barely looked at it. And that's like neither here nor there about the story because I got what I wanted at the end. But that was like red flag number one. Actually, that was like red flag number 15 as to why that job was not good for me. And we don't have time for that right now. We don't have time for that conversation right now. That's going to take a lot more of my physical and mental effort to converse about. So, anyway, I showed him the binder. He's like, "You're good to go." So that next year we started the team, and I had probably like 12 to 15 kids kind of like consistently going. We had practice, which was like club meetings at the time during lunch. We basically just kind of looked into like different ways to engage students with debating. We used to do like a question of the week where we would send out a question that would like have students like debating. We would like put it on their lockers, we'd put it in the announcements. Didn't get a lot of traction. We would do a lot of like school-wide events. We would do some fundraising. That first year was basically saying like, hey, if you're here for the long haul, like you're here, right? So those eighth graders that I had the year before were now ninth graders. And basically, I was building this team with like a bunch of ninth graders and saying that this is something we want to do. Blah, blah, blah. We didn't compete. We didn't do anything. We bought t shirts and we did some fundraising. Like, that was about it. And they were like, okay, so when are we gonna like actually compete? And I was like, I gotta look into that because there's like a bunch of rules, there's a bunch of regulations that we like have to follow. And we're like not ready yet. I don't know what I'm doing. Y'all don't know what you're doing. So we just have to like practice, show people that it's like a ready to go thing. I was very, consistent in that first year with these kids that they were really ready to go and like do the great debaters thing. And I looked at them and I was like, hey, homies, like if we're going to do that, like there's a lot more things that need to happen, right? Like we need to get approved like through the state, activity coordinators and things like that. And so we basically spent that whole first year just kind of establishing ourselves and saying like, hey, there's 15 of us and a coach who is like ready and able to do this thing. Okay. And that whole first year, we lost a few kids here and there. There was lack of consistency, blah, blah, blah. That summer, after having conversed with the administration at the school again, I kind of reached out and I said, "Hey, like I have these kids that are like ready to compete. They're ready to take it to the next level. We're ready to like, make a chapter here at this school that is approved through the state league, right?" So I don't want to say we, but the kids did help. But I did this is I went to, the state organization and I said, "Hey, how do I get a team?" And they're like, "You need this and this and this. You need a letter of rec from, your administrator. You need like to fill out this form and all these different things." And so I did all the things, and probably I think June of like the next year, so going into like my third year of teaching, it was ready to go. We were approved through the state not legislature. We were approved through the state league that said like, hey, this school now has a functioning team, so you're free to compete. You're free to do all these things. And that second year started, and I told the kids that, and I was like, oh my god, guys, guess what? We're ready to go. Like I did all the work this summer. Like we are ready to go. We are ready to roll. Like let's get going. So we started that year off, and I didn't know anything about like tournament schedules, where to find it, blah blah blah. Once I finally found all that information, it was probably like October, November. At this point, I had some new freshmen, so then my original team was sophomores at this point. And I was like, "Hey guys, let's go to our first tournament." I took the two boys that like wanted to start this team off. We went to a tournament like 45 minutes away. Did not know what to expect. I knew there was a tournament. I signed them up. I did the registration. They were going to be a debate team. We went to that tournament and I did not realize like what it looked like. So a tournament is you go there, there's like hundreds of kids, there's dozens of schools, and you just kind of wait around waiting for your event to start. So when we got there, the public forum debate was wave B. So I was like, yeah, you guys should be starting like 8:30, 9 o'clock, like when you're ready. And tournaments fall behind. So it was probably like 10 before they started competing. And they're like, oh my God, Kassick, I'm so bored. I didn't think it would be like this. And I was like, I know, like I didn't either. Like I'm going to be honest. Like I didn't know this was the thing that it was going to look like. Like I did not know it was going to look like this, right? So they start getting like really discouraged. They go to their rounds. They're like, "Oh my god, we like did it. It was super fun. It was super interesting." Like they enjoyed that piece of it. But then it was like between the rounds, just like all the waiting. They're like, "Oh my god, this is so boring. This is awful." And I was like, "Dudes, like I'm really sorry. Like I didn't know it was going to be like this." And they stayed there all day, and I was like, "Yeah, we can probably just like leave at whatever, like I don't know." And I was like still, I think I was like 22, 23 at the time, so I was just a baby, like I was a child. And to basically take a Saturday field trip without any kind of guidance on like what it looked like. And like I said, our school did not have a team like this before, so they didn't know what to expect, and they didn't know how to like support me in that. So I was just like flying by the seat of my pants, like trying to make this work. And we finished that tournament. I went back to them on Monday, and they're like, "Oh my God, Kassick, this is not what I thought it was going to be." And I was like, I don't know, guys. Like, you can stick it out, and we can keep going, and we can get more people to do it." They didn't go to another tournament, unfortunately. and they got into other things. They're like, Kassick, if this is what it's going to be like I don't want to use my time on this. And I was like, I'm literally apologized like 30 times. And to this day, I still like wonder what could have been if I like had a better estimation of what it was. Like I still wonder about those two kids and saying like, hey, if they would have like went as a debate team, because those two kids were brilliant, and if this podcast ever reaches their ears, they're gonna know exactly who I'm talking about, and they're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. But I always wonder like how good they could have been in that event and how successful they could have been, because those kids were brilliant and they were like the reason the team exists in the first place. So I owe a lot to them, but I also understand like they stuck with it for a year in a really kind of like sad club that didn't really do a whole lot to then, go to their first competition after working that hard just to like be disappointed. And, looking back, like I said, I wish things were a little bit different that way, but they happened the way they needed to. Later on that year, I had a few sophomores that we deemed like the core four, the four that would always go to tournaments, and they found a really good rhythm with each other and the team, and they didn't really know what to expect either, but they weren't sophomores, they were freshmen. Sorry, they didn't know what to expect either. They were freshmen. We called them the core four, and we went to probably 5 tournaments that year, and they were pretty consistent with it, because at that point I kind of knew what to expect. I was like, guys, there's a lot of waiting around. It's a lot of blah 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 whatever. So the core four did a bunch of tournaments that year, and they were really excited. We didn't qualify for state. We didn't qualify for any like big tournaments, but we were a team. We were a functioning team, and at the end of the day, if you're from the last episode, and at the end of the day, that's not something that I can like be upset about like at all. Like I was so proud that that core group of kids decided to like stick around, because that was like the team. The core four now means so much different. So much it means something so much different now, because looking back, it's really like the consistency of those four kids that kind of like created my ability to like continue in the event, right? Not all of those kids like kept going with it. There was a few that stuck it around till senior year, but I'll get into that. And at the end of that year, we had like a celebration, we had a banquet, we had all of those things. We like celebrated like what we came for. We got shirts on them that said like "We are sad," because speech and debate. It had literally like on like a shirt just like this. I'm wearing like a t-shirt, and it had like the school's name kind of on like the front chest like it usually does, just like a little logo, and then on the back it said in big letters, it said "We are," and then going down the side it said SAD, because speech and debate, and then we like kind of spelled it out. So on our shirts it said "We are sad," and we had sweatpants that kind of had the same logo that went down the side. It said "We are sad," and that was like our merch, and that was a win. Like that's still a win to this day. Like I still have that shirt somewhere. um I also have a shirt framed from like that first group of ninth graders from the year prior, and they all signed it, and I said, guys, someday this is going to be a really cool thing to have, and it's framed. And that is like the moment that none of those kids, like I said, ever really competed past like one tournament, but I have a shirt with all their names on it, of the founding members, and there's about 12 or 13 of their names on there. So it's a really cool like lore dump for where my speech and debate journey like kind of came from. So the end of my second year was as a speech and debate coach. The end of my second year as a speech and debate coach definitely felt like monumental, right? Where I was like, damn, I'm really putting in the work. Like I'm really doing this. Like I'm doing this really cool, amazing thing for kids, and they're enjoying it and we're finding success. I, got a snack bin to like carry snacks, because I started learning like what it took to be a coach. And over that summer I like did more research, and I devoted more time to like preparing and like marketing to get more kids to join. Like I did the like overachieving thing of like, I need to get a gold star in this. I need to put all my energy and attention here. I hyper fixated on having this idea of a team that really took me to like this next phase of things. So then going into my third year as a coach, we had a couple of new students joined that were like in the same grade as the kids that had already joined. So like he had left, a lot of them had like left the school and then came back, so then they joined the team, and we had like now this core group of like 8 or 10 students that was like, yeah, Kassick, like let's go, we are locked in, we know what to do this year, we're gonna do good, we got this, we're gonna do it. And this was 2019 2020. I think this had to have been, it could have been, no, this had to have been, no, my third year was For 2016, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19. No, okay, just kidding. One more year, and then we'll talk about that. But they were still like really, they were ready to go. They were hyped. They were excited. They were like, let's do it, Kassick. Like, we got this. Um, we went to a bunch of tournaments. I knew what to expect. I knew where to find the schedule. We did all the things. And this is a very important core moment for us and, as a team and the lore of the team. And it was that winter. There was an overnight tournament in a different state, so we would have to drive a few hours to like go to this tournament. And it was my first overnight trip as a teacher, as an educator. Again, this was my third year of teaching, and we decided to go to this tournament overnight and compete in a 2 or 3 day tournament. And I did all the paperwork, I did everything I needed to do, and we drove all the way up there just to get there and then realize, oh my god, we weren't prepared at all for this. We were not prepared at all. It was one of the earliest great experiences of like my teaching career, where we went to this like school in the middle of nowhere in a different state with like all of these people that we've seen before, all these people we competed against before. And we kind of look around and we're like, this is the lore dump here. We were at a Target on the Saturday of our competition after having been there for a night. We woke up and we are like, we're hungry, and I was like, okay, let's go to Target, I guess. Like they have food, right? Remember, again, I'm like 23, 24 years old at this point. Like, I barely knew how to take care of myself. How am I, whatever. And we go to Target and they were like, "Oh my god, I like want toaster strudels, like I want, pizza bagels for later." And I was like, "Okay, guys, like let's use our critical thinking skills here, right? How are we going to cook these? Like we don't know how to cook these." This was a tournament. We were in, miles away from home, hours away from home. We were tired, we were exhausted, we were all dressed really fancily in a Target, and they looked around, they're like, "Oh my god, we should get a toaster." And I was like, "You guys, we can't fucking buy a toaster." I didn't say that to them, but that's what I was thinking. I was like, "Guys, we can't buy a toaster. We cannot buy a toaster. What do you mean? They're probably so expensive. Where are we going to plug it in? What do you mean we're going to buy a toaster? Blah, 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 blah." Like all these things. We went to this tournament and they were adamant. And I was like, fine, let's go look. Let's go look to find a fucking toaster. You know what I mean? Because you're right, you have to eat. So we went down the aisle. We found like a $20 like toaster oven, like a Kitchen Smith like toaster, like very generic. I was like, this is all I can afford. Like, I'm paying for this. This is not the school. This is not whatever. This is $20 that I'm putting into your guys's food, right? Like, I'm trying to take care of you. So we bought a toaster. We brought it to the school. And within an hour, we were eating toaster strudels on a cafeteria table in the middle of a different state on a Saturday morning in the cold, windy city that we were in. And we also bought gingerbread houses. I remember very specifically we also brought gingerbread houses because it was like, around Christmas time. Anyway, that's not the story here. So that toaster then carried us through that whole tournament. Like, we were making dino nuggets, we were making pizza bagels. The next day, for the next day of the tournament, or a little bit later, we went to buy more things. We were like, oh my God, we can put so many things in this toaster. Like, this is such a good idea. Whoever thought of this, blah, 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 blah. And I don't know where it came from or when we decided to do this or whatever, but it suddenly just became this like entity. Like, we have to bring our toaster. And I was like, guys, we should name it. I don't know if this was me. Like I said, like, I don't know where this came from. We decided to name the toaster, and we decided to name her Susan. Don't know why, don't know where that name came from, but we decided to name her Susan. And the rest, as they say, is history. Like, that is the biggest lore dump of the team and where it came from that I could ever imagine, because it was this toaster that was like a completely random thought that I still have Susan in my garage. Like, I quit my job there, so I didn't want to keep Susan around because I didn't know who was going to take over or if anyone was going to take over. But Susan persisted for 8 years. She brought us to tournaments. She cooked dino nuggets. I almost said nuggies like they usually do. She cooked dino nuggets. She made pizza bagels. She, warmed us up when we needed her to. And she almost lit a school on fire once. That's maybe a story I'll tell in this podcast. I don't know how deep we're gonna get here. Like, I really don't, because it's already been, oh my god, it's been 40 minutes, and I'm only on year 3, you guys. So anyway, um, we bought a toaster. We named her Susan. She became the icon we all aspire to be. And like I said, the rest is history. From that moment on, like, I think that was like the defining moment of the community that you can build in a place like this. Like, that was the essence of what speech and debate became. Is we went to this Target, needed food, and we bought a toaster, and that toaster became like the thing that we worship and praise and owe our sanity to. And it was at that moment that I was like, what? Like I'm building like a community here. Like this isn't just a team that goes and competes anymore. We now have like this experience. We have this like uniting mascot that like, we take everywhere with us. We have this like uniting factor, this uniting experience that creates a community. And it was that tournament that really like shifted things for me. And granted, like we had a really good, nice community before. We, had that like core four group of kids that like really created like this team and this energy. But it was really the when we bought Susan. It was really like when we bought Susan and kind of created what she is that really made it into something more than, yeah, we're just like competing and I'm just a coach and blah 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 blah. It became so much more than that when this fucking toaster, bro. Like I can't explain it. So that year was a big year for us, like in general. And, as we kind of progressed, it kind of gets blurry around here. I think like I said, I remember this year as being the year that COVID kind of like put a stop to things, but I don't think that's true. So the next like big experience, right? Like we had a bunch of kids like joining, we had a bunch of kids like, over the next couple of years like coming in from different schools. And there's one student in particular that came in from a different school in the area that had a speech and debate team that he was a member of, and he came in and gave us like like this whole new entity of like, here's what a speech and debate team is, here's what a speech and debate team looks like. Kassick, you're doing it all wrong. Like, let's fix this. And I was like, holy shit, like, what you're doing. And that's crazy. So we really leaned into that. And that gave us like a big boost of momentum. And then, you know, literally right before COVID, we had the state qualifying tournament. And this was the first year that I remember going into it. And I was like, you guys, oh my God, like we have a chance this year to qualify for the state tournament. And we signed up. Biggest tournament of the year was the state qualifying tournament. Things have like since changed. It was March. It was actually probably February 2020 when state quals were. It was February 2020. I, woke up early on a Saturday to go to the state qualifying tournament. And I was really excited because, like I said, I was like, this is the first year that I feel like we actually have a chance. And at the end of that tournament, I had a team. I think they went 3-1 with their debates, and that was like the first time that like any kid on my team had a winning record. Because, like I said, like for the past like few years, I didn't know what I was doing. We had like really smart kids, we had like really capable kids, we had kids that were willing to learn, and we had kids that like succeeded in other events. But something about like that debate category just had so many nuances that like I didn't understand as a coach. That when they got to the end of the tournament, they called their names and they said, "Here are your state qualifiers." I remember sitting there and just being like so awestruck and like so proud that these two kids qualified for the state tournament. Like out of everyone there, like kids on my team, I was like, "What do you mean?" Like a year ago, 2 years ago, we were writing notes on lockers to see if people would care about us. And then, a couple years later, we were qualifying for a state tournament. Like to this day, like right now, like granted it's cold in my room, but like I'm literally getting chills, like just thinking about the fact that like I made that. Like I did the work to create the team to give them that opportunity. I didn't debate, like ain't no way. Like even in high school, like there's no way I would have done that. But the idea that I was able to lead the way and advocate for this activity and advocate for these students in a way that like got them to this huge point of success was just like an incredible win for me. And it was that moment and the toaster. And a few weeks later, like literally the day before COVID, when nat quals were happening and we were not doing well at nat quals, like the same luck did not hit us. But when we went to national qualifying tournaments, we left early because we were like, we're not going to finals, let's just leave. We went to watch Onward at the theaters because the tournament, we decided to leave, and we went to watch Onward at the movie theater. And we just had like this nice little moment of watching that. And then after that tournament, we went to Village Inn because it was still early. We had a tournament, we watched Onward, we went to Village Inn, and just like we sat at a table at Village Inn after that tournament specifically for probably 3 hours. Like we were crying in that corner of Village Inn. We were, literally telling our deepest dark secrets. We were really getting deep with that kind of stuff. And I can't make this up, like as much as I wish I could, like the idea that suddenly like this group of 10 to 12 students just created like this little community, this little like family of people that, want to see each other succeed and like want to be involved and help each other and, just experience things together was I cannot explain to you like that the pride that I have in that. And like to this day as an educator, and I'll say this again in this episode, but this team, it was in like those moments like after tournament village and runs early on that like really, cemented the idea that like this is the thing that I am the most proud of as an educator. Like I've done a lot of work for kids like in the classroom. I have helped kids like learn a whole bunch of stuff and I have impacted kids in classrooms like for, almost a decade at this point, but nothing will bring me more pride or joy or, just like passion for the work that than coaching that team did for that many years. And I'm going to get into this a little bit later as well because I have like something saved for it, but it was in like those little moments that, I realized that like I am proud of this. And that's not something that's like always easy for me to admit because shoot, damn, that was hard. It's not always something that's easy for me to admit because it's easy to tell myself that like I can do better. But like looking at that team and like realizing what I created in like the corner of a village inn, or watching a couple of kids qualify for state, and looking at a toaster on a cafeteria table, thinking about that toaster sitting in my garage for the past few months is literally heartbreaking because the pride and joy that it has brought me in the past is literally immeasurable. And it's these stories like I cannot stress enough like how much these stories are often overlooked in education. Like it's not about anything else other than that like immense pride and joy you get from like seeing a student succeed, or these little experiences of like buying a toaster or sitting in a village inn or watching a movie. Like it's these things that are just like so inexplicably linked to education that nobody really talks about them because nobody knows they exist or nobody's like willing to acknowledge them or talk about them, but I can assure you that these things are happening everywhere. And that's like what I hope to like embellish on more, so not to like be a buzzkill after all that motivation, but when we had qualified for that tournament, y'all know what 2020 brought us, and a few weeks later, COVID canceled the entire state tournament for like the first time in history or whatever, and we didn't get to go. From for the next like 2 years, I was like clawing my way back to like build this momentum again. The team was, kind of rough there for a minute. We had like new freshmen coming up. I was trying to hype up. At the end of every year in my language arts class, I would do the same kind of debates to like hype kids up. We would debate about, we would honestly, when I taught seventh grade, we were debating about which chapter in Anne Frank's diary was like the most impactful to her story, and that brought, oh God, it's my favorite event. It's my favorite lesson that I've ever taught in my whole life is that debate at the end of the year. Even when I like didn't teach English, we would debate about like what's the best piece of advice that, a student can come up with. And we would function the same debates. Like it would be a whole school event. Like I would get teachers to come in, I would get speech and debate kids to come in, and I would do that every year. And as COVID came around, that became more of a challenge. But the way that I still advocated for that event at the end of my, for my final basically every year at the end of the year in March, April, May, that really created a community too that like we began to be known in the whole school. It's like, oh, Kassick's doing his debates again. Like, who's going to go watch? And even students who weren't on the debate team would come back and be like, oh, you're doing your debates. Like, let me come and watch. And I began then to like build a name for myself as a speech and debate coach, like at that school. And people begin to like realize what it was for because I lived and breathed it in my class. Like I would advocate for the debates every single year. I would, like I said, guests would come in, parents would come in. I would make it a whole big event. I would give the winners like their own individual squishies. If you know, you know. I would, get pizza for the winners. I would buy lunch for the winners depending on things, right? Like it was a big event, and I hope the students that I've had like remember that, and even like the teachers I've worked with at that school probably know what I'm talking about because for the past, this will be the first year that debates don't happen. That's wild. Um so yeah, like I really began to build like a community not only on my team but like a community that was like recognized throughout the school, and that's something that again I will never like forget or take for granted because of the fact that like it was like the one thing in my teaching life at that school, in my professional career, and in my like personal life even, that has like been built just by me. Like nobody knew how to do that other than me. Like nobody could have done that other than me. And that's not to like sit here and say like, "Oh my god, like look at how good I am at everything." Like I'm just yapping. You know, you guys know what you signed up for. You clicked on this. So, anyway, it's just like the confluence of so many different things. And like I said, like after COVID, for the next couple of years, we were doing virtual tournaments. We were, struggling to get kids to stay on the team because virtual tournaments just like don't hit the same. And it wasn't until a couple of years after COVID where we were starting to get our momentum back. Like I had a bunch of new freshmen coming up, I had a bunch of younger students coming up, and they were like, "No, Kassick, like we got to keep this going." And there's a couple of waves of students in particular that around that time when they were freshmen is like right when COVID was like kind of easing its way out. And they stuck around with the team for a while. And the way that, I was doing debates in my middle school classes and building a community and like an essence for like the debate, world in at my school, I started getting whispers about like, what if I started a middle school team? Because my school was 612. And at this point, we only had like a high school team. So I was like, what if we started a middle school team? Like, what if we competed as a middle school? And I looked into it, and this one took me a lot more effort because in my state, like, there wasn't a whole lot of middle school teams at the time. I had reached out to like an old teacher who like wasn't even teaching at her school anymore. She's like, yeah, like we had a team, blah 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 blah. And then that led me to like a school who's like barely active in it, and then that led me to like someone who was like moving schools a lot. And basically, they were like, yeah, here's our like weird schedule, and I was like, okay, sick. Like, so I'm good to go, basically, is what you're saying. And they were like, yeah, like if you have kids, like whatever. And I was like, okay, next year we're doing it. So we did debates in class. I had a couple of students be like, oh my God, you're starting a middle school team? And I was like, yeah, like join next year, please. And again, that summer, this was like I don't even know what year this was anymore. Like I've lost track of which year this was, which year I started the middle school team, and I think it was like year 6 of coaching, so like year 7 of actual teaching, where my middle school team was up and running, and I got the approval. I advocated to get paid for it, which flashback a little bit, they didn't pay me for like 2 or 3 years, even though it was like a state sanctioned activity, and I kept track of my hours for a while on a spreadsheet. Every time I would go to a tournament, every time I would go to practice, and every time I was like lesson planning for speech and debate. And they were like, yeah, we should probably pay you. And I was like, yeah, no shit, you should pay me. So I also had to advocate for that. Um, and by the time that I was done advocating for that, they were paying me just as much as the high school basketball coach. So that means something, and I'm very proud of that because that's the highest paid coaching position in the school. And I advocated for speech and debate so much that they were like, holy shit, you're putting in a lot of hours to this. And I was like, yeah, no, no fuck. Like, no way. Of course I am. No fuck is not a sentence. Like, what was that? I'm nervous. Why am I nervous? So anyway, I advocated for that team and that position so much that I advocated to say, like, yeah, no, I deserve as much, if not more, than the high school head varsity coach, and that's what they gave me eventually. So that took a few years. I think that was like year 5. They st- finally started to pay me. So anyway, when I started the middle school team, I got paid for that. Not in the same way. They didn't pay me for hours. They paid me at a stipend at the end of the year, but basically for speech and debate, just to be like completely transparent, by my time last year, having coached at a high school level for 7 years and then having coached at a middle school level for that would have been my third year, I was probably making like 5,500 extra dollars, maybe 6,000 extra dollars a year on top of my teaching salary. But that was not immediate, and that was not an easy thing to ask for. And I think I worked at a school that kind of allowed for those kind of things to like be okay. That's not the case everywhere, unfortunately, but I will tell you that it did take a lot of advocacy to like get to that point. So anyway, we started a middle school team, and from there we started competing as a middle school. And that was like a big deal to me because I think the middle school team started with like maybe 10, 15 kids. I don't super remember, but middle schoolers were like dying to get interested in something. So I remember in my first year, I had a lot of 6th and 7th graders. I had a couple of 8th graders that I had taught before that I was like, hey, please come and join the team because I need people. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And my third year of coaching that team, we had 32 middle schoolers and about 15 high schoolers. So as a total, we had 40 plus kids on the team, and that was my last year there. And I'm skipping over like so much stuff. Like there's not even space. I've been talking for an hour and I feel like I've talked about nothing because of the fact that there's so many little moments that I have forgotten about or glossed over or, have just not even bothered to allude to because there's so much there. But by the my last moments at that school, like there was 45 kids that I was in charge of coaching. Like I had been going to two practices a week after soccer season was over, between soccer seasons of coaching, and I would, coach on Wednesdays for a couple hours after school. Our school had Fridays off, so I would coach for 3 hours on Fridays. Middle school tournaments would be from like 4 to 10 on like a Friday night, and high school tournaments would be on Saturdays or like weird after school tournaments. Like there were times coaching just this last year that I would be going to like 4 tournaments a week. I think was the most that I've ever done, where we had like an after school one on Tuesday, we had a tournament on Friday for middle school. We had a tournament on Saturday, and then, online tournaments that pop up. And, 3 or 4 tournaments a week was probably, obviously that's on the high end. Like it wasn't always like that. Sometimes I would have some time off and just do one tournament a week on a Saturday. But there was a lot of time devoted to that event and those things. And I would not trade any of it for anything. Like I was exhausted. I realized that like a lot of that contributed to like the burnout that I've already like alluded to and talked about. But the fact that like I look back on all of those things with like fondness, and there are some dicey times of like driving all the way down like through mountains in a big bus for 2 hours just to bring 12 middle schoolers to a competition that I didn't get back to the school until like 1 a.m. and and then compete the next day. Like the fact that I would do a tournament an hour away at a school that like didn't get done until like 11:30, and then immediately wake up in the morning at 6 a.m. to drive a bunch of kids another hour away to do another tournament is exhausting. And like I know that I could do it again if I needed to, but it's looking back on it with nothing but like fondness and joy, because the kids that I got to, get close to and have these like beautiful like mentorship relationships with, that just like literally have like changed my life so much. And it's mind-boggling to me that that part of my life is like over in some capacities with them. And there's nothing that I would trade for those experiences. Like those to this day like mean so much to me. Like I alluded to it in my last episode, but we would go to IHOP at the end of every tournament, where we would just kind of sit and like debrief and just like talk about like life and the tournament and all these different things. We would go to In and Out like after tournaments on, late at night, and just like have those really cool team bonding like moments and, debrief time. And we, went to Arizona as a middle school team in 2023 for the national tournament, and that was the first time that I've taken kids out of state, like on a plane. And going from like driving 2 hours overnight to then staying like a week with, like I said last episode, like 12 middle schoolers. Like I can do anything. I can literally do anything now because if you are a teacher, you understand how hard that is to take, 14 teenagers somewhere by yourself for a week. And if you're not a teacher, you probably are just shuddering at the thought of dealing with that many kids all at once, and crying in hotel rooms because they miss their parents or are fighting with their friends or are sad, and you know telling them in between rounds that like you're super proud of them and want nothing but the best for them, and debriefing their angers with their partners, and walking around a school in 100-degree weathers with 15 different kids at a time, because individually, because like they need to talk to you about stuff. And I walked around that school in Arizona 100 times probably, chit chatting with students and just like debriefing and reflecting with them. And I was like, okay, whose turn is it? Let's go take a walk. Like, I'm going to go walk with this kid. I'll be back in a second. And just like the capacity to have those conversations, and like the trust that they had in me to have those conversations. And that's not even like, you know, confined to Arizona. That's also confined to like all these other tournaments and all these other moments in like practice where they would be like, Kassick, I just need to talk. Like, can we just like go sit in the hallway and talk? And I was like, cool. And the way that they cared so much, and the way that like that made me care so much, and the way that all of these different things just like came together to create this like beautiful little community. Like I said, I know I'm glossing over like so many different just like aspects of what this team is and what this team does and like what this community stands for, but I've already been talking for an hour and I still have like a pretty emotional beat that I want to get to. I was thinking about like doing this, you know, episode and like talking about speech and debate because like I said, it's like the thing in my teaching career that I am the most proud of is like creating a team there. Um, After I had left, that team no longer exists. Like at that school, like it is trying, it's holding on by like its thinnest thread that it's ever held on to. Um, I think that coach is probably still getting paid too, which is like a bunch of bullshit, but whatever. Uh, the fact that there's not even, I had 40 kids last year, maybe five of them stuck around, and I don't even think that's true anymore. So I just, I was thinking about creating this episode and all of these different things, and I was looking through all these different moments like I alluded to at the beginning just to like find inspiration of like what to talk about and realizing that like I created like confidence in so many of these kids. I created like this little community for so many of these kids, and the way that I know that these kids look back on these moments and miss them and are nostalgic for them is something I will never take for granted, right? So I was looking through those things as I was thinking about doing this episode, and I was like, what could I like talk about? And I basically want to talk about the journey and like what it meant and like all of our different experiences that we've had and like where our lore came from. Oh my God, I didn't even talk about our lore notebook or the other thing I wanted to talk about that my school got mad at me for. Um, Talked about Susan, talked about middle school. I'm looking at my notes, talked about all these things. There was a notebook that last year we lost at the first tournament, and foreshadowing to me quitting my job because last year I also lost all my squishies. But this notebook, we bought I think I bought a notebook with the core four. So this was like my second year. They were like, Kassick, we need notebooks. Like, we need to take notes on things. And I was like, ah, shit, you're probably right. Like, we probably should be taking notes when you're in the middle of a debate round. So I went and bought a bunch of notebooks. One of the notebooks that I bought, I thought it was silly because I'm obsessed with these dogs. They had like a bulldog on the front, and it was this really colorful notebook, had like a big bulldog on the front. It was really like just trashy, like a trashy notebook, like stupid, like vintage, like all these different things. And I bought it, and all of a sudden that became like this place where we would write down like quotes. Like there was this other student on another team we called Frosty that like basically emulated everything that we wanted to have for our team. We would put like our favorite quotes from it in there that we've said like throughout the years. There was just like memories of tournaments. There was, flyers. There was a picture of Susan that somebody drew. There was like just so many things in that notebook, and we lost it. Like there was a lot of stuff in there that was just like lore for our team that just like basically like the first day of practice for every new kid on the team, we would be like, you have to look at the notebook and you have to get used to it. You can't add anything because that's not what it's about. You have to get the privilege to add stuff to the notebook. But then the notebook had like all of these different just like memories from like day one of the core four that they were writing down. They were like, first page is the core four. We had all of these quotes. We had all of these little just like memories and moments and experiences that like created the team. Like we would sketch out our t-shirts in there. We would write down things we wanted to do. We would write down our goals for the year. We would, write down all the conversations we had at Village Inn. And, that's where like our meme PowerPoint came from. Like we had a PowerPoint, a Google slideshow, whatever, where we would just collate like a bunch of memes for the team, and they were they were just so like ridiculous and like so perfect for that moment that they that kind of energy can never be recreated. But we had this fucking notebook, and it was full of just like all this team lore and all of these memories and experiences, and we lost it. And we lost it last year, and I cried. Not gonna lie, I cried when I found out that notebook was gone because it literally held like the soul of our team. I swear that and Susan, that notebook and Susan held like the soul to our team. So if you guys ever see like a notebook with a bulldog on the front with a bunch of like colors and it's like kind of holographic with a bunch of weird quotes and a bunch of weird drawings of toasters in there, like please return it to me. Please slide into my DMs and tell me that you found it because I will pay top dollar. I would pay top dollar to get that notebook back. Even now, knowing my team is non-existent. Anyway, that was the lore notebook, and I didn't even get to the other part. So another part of our team, and this is kind of alluding to like something that you know went kind of our Ari, it kind of went like kind of off base. I don't know what word I'm trying to say there. It kind of went like off base on my last year. Is I when we went to each tournament, like eventually we got into this like habit of, taking like a memento from each school. And what that means is like we would, students would like stumble upon something as like a memory. I think the first thing we found in like the in like a cafeteria was like a ping pong paddle, and we would like sign our little names on it, and we would put the date of the tournament, and we would take that back and I would like hang it on my wall for speech and debate, right? Like I would have like a wall of memories and mementos from each tournament that we went to. It wasn't like every tournament. It was just like, oh, we found this like thing in the trash. We found this thing in the lost and found. Like we're gonna take it and sign it, and we're gonna do all these different things, and we're gonna like create this like little moment and experience. And did the kids kind of get out of control with it? Yeah, they're teenagers. They're gonna get out of control with it, right? But when they did get out of control, when they did something that like or took something that I was like, guys, like you can't, like we need to establish some rules here. So we establish rules. You can't take anything that somebody is going to miss. You can't take something that's valuable. You can't so we would take doorstops, we would take a tennis ball, we would take there was a there was like a little witch's wand that I have. There's like a witch's hat. All of this stuff was like lost and found in the trash, literally on the floor. We found like a wire one time at a school, and they were like, "Oh my god, this is it!" And I was like, you guys are such fucking nerds. Like, I love you so much." And for we did this for years, like 3 or 4 years probably, where I was just like collating stuff and I was like hanging it up on my wall. Like I even moved classrooms a bunch of times. And this last year of teaching is they kind of found out, and the admin just like believed that like, oh my God, you're stealing from schools and blah blah blah. You're making it okay that kids are stealing, and like they you say that's okay, blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, you're right. Sure, we're stealing. Awesome, cool. And the harm that was done in that was to nobody but to me and my team, because not once did a school ever complain. Not one. I'm not saying that what it was right or whatever, but the fact that the admin didn't even care to like hear my side of story on that. Like they didn't even bother, to like say anything about it. But outside of saying like you're a terrible person, like you need to not. And I was like, okay, fine. Then if that's the case, then I'm gonna quit, because you don't even trust me to do anything here in this building. There's some other things there, and I'm getting into a weird space, and I don't want to talk about it yet. This is what I mean. Like it's like an emotional thing to like get through, because I get so pissed off especially when we're talking about speech and debate. I was just thinking about today, which brings me back to my moment, right, where I was thinking about it today about what I'm going to talk about. And I think about speech and debate all the time, because this is the reason I stayed at my old school for so long, is because I like loved this community and like what I built, and I took so much pride and joy in like being the coach and the leader for that team, that some days where I would like be lying on the floor, like after a panic attack in my fourth or fifth year of teaching, and when I threatened to quit, and when I all of these other things that happened years and years and years ago, I would think about the speech and debate kids, and I would look at Susan, and I would look at the t-shirt that's framed on my wall, and I would say, nope, I can't leave, gotta stick around for them. And for a bunch of time, that was like the reason I stayed at that school, was because of the speech and debate team, and the kids on it, and like what I was to them, and all these different things. And I just get so mad that like that almost became like a point of contention, in the reason that like I could no longer stay, and the fact that nobody else could see the value that I brought to that team, or the value that that team brought to the school, or the value that that team brought to those kids. This is what I was thinking about today, that got me just like so like kind of pissed off, because of the fact that it's like, when I quit that job, when there was conflict with the admin for a bunch of different reasons that I'll get into eventually. One of them being my decisions as a speech and debate coach, basically because we were stealing all these things. Um, the idea was, I get so mad because they not only did they take something away from me, because I finally made the choice that I was like, I don't want to be involved with this if you guys don't trust me. Like, I made that choice, but the fact that I had to make that choice because of their distrust and disvalue in me, then kind of led me to realize that they're taking away me from those kids. They are taking away these experiences. They're taking away their voices. They are taking away their memories and triumphs and failures, and they're taking away all of these things that this community stands for, that education stands for, is they're taking that away from 40 something kids without even a second thought because I decided that it was best for me to leave because of how I was being treated. And I think about that and like my blood is like boiling, like I can feel my heart racing, like I can feel my head like getting dizzy like right now because when I decided to quit my job and then realizing what that meant for these 40 kids that I was literally going to go to nationals last summer with them, and we had a high schooler qualify for like the first time in a few years since COVID, and the way that I was reeling about that and then recognizing what that meant they were missing out on, that's the part I get mad about. I don't care that I had to quit and readjust. I don't care that I went through all these different issues about trying to find a new job, and I don't care that I had to quit. I don't care about any of that shit. Like I truly fucking don't. The thing that I care most about is that those people couldn't see that they were taking away something that mattered to the kids, and the fact that the kids lost out on that is something that I will never be able to like forgive or make peace with because of the fact that those people in charge didn't care. And that's the thing I get mad about. Treat me however the fuck you want, but do not take anything away from the kids. So that leads me to like what I was looking for in the first place. And this is what I'm going to end on because after I read this, I'm going to lose my marbles all over again. So when I realized that it was my turn to, leave the school, the first thing I did, this is the first email I sent before I sent an email to the entire staff that I was leaving. I sent an email to all the students on my team and all the parents on my team. And I saved it because I knew that someday I would be making a podcast. No, I I knew that I would want it someday to just remind me of like where I was at the time and like what it meant for me at the time. And we were making a lot of forward motion and I had to leave. So I decided to write an email to my whole team that I decided to send an email to my whole team that kind of explained what was happening and all these different things. So what I'm going to do right now to end it in this episode is I'm going to read the email that I sent. And if this doesn't encapsulate everything that I believe this team stands for and everything that, these kids and these parents are now missing out on, that this community is missing out on, then nothing will. And I don't know what that means if this doesn't encapsulate everything that I stood for. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to get a drink of water first because I've been literally talking nonstop for an hour. I moved away from the mic so you couldn't hear my drinking. Here's the email. Hey everyone, I've started and erased this message probably 100 times. I can't seem to find the right words to express the gratitude, pride, and value I find in this community. The community I have been, am, and will continue to be the most proud of. How do I possibly convey all of that in a simple goodbye message? That said, this team deserves one more than anything else I am choosing to leave behind. This team started on a whim, with hardly any backing behind it. We were meeting during lunch every so often. We didn't know how to compete. We were called the Knowledge Bowl over and over again. We barely existed outside of a post on the school website. We had no money to buy snacks. Nobody knew what they were in for, not even me. 7 years later, we have competed nationally more than once. We have a reputation among other schools, even if it's just because of our snacks and our vibes. There are a record 40 students on this team. We have deep lore, all written up down in a notebook we unfortunately lost. We have a toaster that we, for a lack of a better word, worship. There's now a middle school team that dominates every tournament. Look how far we've come. I'm so proud of this team and all that we've created. I had to say a proper goodbye, at least as close as I could possibly get. Thanks for supporting this team, even when I didn't have any direction. Thanks for trusting me to take your children on long trips across the state, the nation even. Thanks for putting your heart into the speeches you write and the arguments you deliver. Thanks for donating your money, your time, your spirit, your energy. Thanks for believing in what we stand for. Thanks for creating a lifetime's worth of memories in random schools, in IHOPs, at In-N-Outs, during snowstorms, on highways, in hotel rooms, on cafeteria floors, in small corners and hallways, in classrooms. Thank you for all the moments I walked the hallways after competitions, after practice, marveling at the beauty of it all. I will forever remember and take with me the joy and pride I felt while coaching this team. Thank you. This team has been the sole reason I have stayed at the school for more years than I should probably share, and I wish I could continue staying for you all. But at the end of the day, yes, I am choosing to leave this all behind for whatever may be in store for me elsewhere. I'm looking for a fresh start. I've done what has needed to be done. I built the foundation. I hope you all continue to turn that foundation into something even more beautiful, something we all can continue to be proud of, something to marvel at, something we can all look back on and say, I was a part of building that. All this said, I have some final updates for you all as a coach. Due to my decision not to return, we will not be attending either the high school or middle school national tournaments we qualified for. Not only are we lacking the funds, but also I cannot say all these goodbyes only to do it twice. I hope you understand. And I so deeply apologize for any inconvenience that puts on your travel plans for the summer and any disappointment for missing out on this opportunity. I wish I would have been able to convey all this earlier. Iowa will have to wait until next year. I believe in, am proud of, and will always, always be rooting for each and every one of you. I may not be around in the ways that we have always hoped and assumed I would be, but I will always be rooting for you. I will always be rooting for this team. I hope you continue to be a part of this team. While my absence may be hard to overcome, you all create the team far more than you realize. Don't give up on your success, your value, and your part of this team. There's still so much opportunity for you here. Thank you for letting me be your coach. It will always be one of my highest honors. I will always carry this team with me. I hope you continue to be a part of this team. While my absence, I already read that. I really ruined the momentum there, didn't I? Thank you for letting me be your coach. It will always be one of my highest honors. I will always carry this team with me. Be good. I'm proud of you. Don't embarrass me, okay? Yeah, so this is this is I'm just going to end it because I'm about to lose my mind. So, I I have created space in this like little corner of the internet for moments like this, and I hope to create more space for this kind of energy where we're allowed to like talk about the things that frustrate and disappoint and make us feel. But I think in doing that, it's also like a place of like intense vulnerability, and that requires effort from everyone, right? So I hope to, create more of that. I hope to talk more about these things because even though I've been talking for a while now, I feel like I haven't said even a, a tiny amount of what I need to say about what this team inspires. But yeah, so I sent that email last year, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. And for the next like week at that school, I cried. Like I fucking cried every fucking day. So on that note, maybe I'll share that email somewhere. If you're interested, tell me. I'll post it somewhere so you guys can read it in its full form. But until then, thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for your support. If you have a second to follow me on all my socials, I am Kassick's Corner on everything. Kassicks Corner. If you have some time to leave a review or leave a comment or anything of that nature, please do so. I am really looking forward to hearing from you and continuing the conversations like this, and even starting conversations like this, and advocating for conversations like this. I think that's all super important. So on that note, thank you so much. Super proud of you. I hope to see you in the next one.